Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is a channel where I explain to you guys a historical event or historical period and basically analyze the effect that event or period had on the political and economic system of the United States today. So today we're going to be talking about the assassination of former President Ronald Reagan and basically remembering his legacy and talking about the effect that had. So, President Ronald Reagan was elected in 1981 as the 40th President of the United States. He was a former Hollywood actor, so he was a very charismatic politician. He was the governor of California for a few decades from 1967 to 1975, and he won the presidential election through a landslide victory. He was very well liked on either side of the political spectrum. Reagan only served for about 2 or 3 months before he was unfortunately assassinated on March 30th of 1981. He was shot outside of a hotel in Washington, D.C. after a labor meeting to the AFL-CIO. He was shot by a man named John Hinckley Jr., as many of you probably know. Immediately after the shooting, Reagan was rushed to George Washington University Hospital, where he passed away from his wounds, and Hinckley was immediately arrested on the site of the crime. He was booked on federal charges, but ultimately pleaded insanity because he was mentally ill with narcissistic personality disorder. Despite many of Reagan's supporters pushing for the death penalty, Hinckley was ultimately instituted into a mental hospital. Many are probably familiar with the story of his pathological obsession with the 1976 film Taxi Driver. Hinckley claimed that he saw the movie more than a dozen times, and he was obsessed with the actress Jodie Foster. This fact very negatively affected the actress, who then quit acting as a career because she felt that her movie was responsible for the death of President Reagan. What happened next was pretty well known. Of course, Vice President George H.W. Bush flew from Texas to Washington to be sworn in as the 41st President of the United States. As many Americans still mourn the death of Reagan, a lot of Bush's policies surrounded gun control and also honoring the memory of his economic policy coined Reaganomics. Bush obviously changed a lot about Reaganomics. Before the death of Reagan, he wasn't actually a fan of the economic policies, and a lot of it changed from just Reagan's policy to an actual economic theory. Also, through my research, I found that many economists of the late 80s looked back at the policies of Reaganomics and ultimately determined that it would cause huge economic inequality if ever implemented. So it's really interesting to think about how that policy would have grown if Reagan were still there to implement it. So as Bush attempted to honor the memory of Reagan by pushing for more gun control and honoring his economic policy, both the moral majority of religious Republicans that really influenced getting Reagan elected in 1981 and the huge supporters of trickle-down economics or Reaganomics felt very unseen by the new presidency, and that was a huge influence in why Bush only served a single term. I also personally believe that the popularization of the two new parties of economic right-wingers and economic left-wingers was a direct result of Reagan's assassination. I believe this is largely because after Reagan's passing, the moral Republicans and religious Republicans felt disconnected from the Republican Party, and the economic Republicans also felt disconnected because Bush was less caring about trickle-down economics. Simultaneously, as many Black communities were suffering from the crack epidemic, our dominant political discourse and Democratic politicians were largely ignoring this issue, and that's when you see the leftist party becoming more popular. So ultimately, I feel like the assassination of Reagan is really when you see the separation of political or moral conservatives and Republicans separate from fiscally conservative Republicans and vice versa with the Democratic Party. I think what we can most take away from the short legacy of Reagan's presidency is just how quickly the political state of America can change, especially with a huge event like the assassination of a president. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I had a really interesting time researching and analyzing how the Reagan assassination affected the United States, and make sure to join me for my next video. Thank you.